So when I was 17, I wanted to know what my purpose in life was. What was my calling? And a normal 17-year-old, I think, would go and see the careers guidance counsellor. But I thought, I'm going to have to fill in loads of questionnaires, and then they'll probably just tell me, you're highly suited to being an office manager. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I like the idea of having a kind of God-given or universe-given purpose. You know, that someone would hand you a piece of paper and it would say, this is what you're here on Earth for. And so I did a very unusual thing, bearing in mind it was Leicestershire in the 1990s, where vegetarianism hadn't even been invented yet. And I was one, which was quite difficult. Someone's mum once made me a lasagna with layers of baked beans in it. So, to find out my purpose, I decided to get a channeled reading from a discarnate guide called Gildas, channeled by a lady called Ruth White. I thought, and this was pre-internet, kind of pre-emails as well, so I thought, this is amazing. Here's my piece of paper with my purpose on it. I get to write down my questions, send it off in the post, and my purpose will arrive via Royal Mail. So I did this. I wrote down a number of questions, including, apart from what was my purpose, which universities should I go to? And it was very exciting, and other 17-year-old questions like, why did I get fired from my waitressing job? That's another story. And I waited for the answer, and finally Royal Mail / the universe delivered it. And first of all, I think this discarnate guide was really in touch with the UCAS system, because it gave excellent university advice. I ended up going to the University of Sussex because of that advice, and I still live here today because of that. So yay! And I was told that my purpose was that I would never feel fulfilled unless I was helping people to bring out their potential in life. Which I thought, oh, that sounds lovely, but it's a bit vague, and I just promptly shoved my purpose into a shoebox in the cupboard and went off to university eventually and got drunk and had a disastrous love life and all of those other things that you do. And after university, I had a series of disastrous jobs. I think perhaps that guidance was right, that my purpose was to help other people to bring out their potential, but I think if you're going to do that, first of all, you have to be pretty good with your own potential. And in my early 20s, that was something that I wasn't doing so well at. I was just doing jobs to survive. I mean, one of the worst ones was that I worked for an advertising agency, for a magazine selling advertising space. And I hated the job so much, I walked out on my lunch break and left a half-eaten donut on the desk. I used to think this was my Homer Simpson moment, but of course Homer would never leave a half-eaten donut. So what happened then was, I come from a bit of a, some ways, dysfunctional family, haven't we all? And had this string of terrible jobs and string of terrible relationships, including a boyfriend that had run up debts in my name. And finally, everything started to catch up with me, and I started to get sick. I got more and more viruses and felt more and more tired, to the point that I actually had to give up my job. And I had, at the age of 26, I felt like I was 106. I think it felt like someone had plugged in a big Hoover and sucked all the energy out of me. And so that was a pretty scary time. And I think that I'd kind of fallen into the gap. And I love this quote from Neil Crofts, who wrote for Action for Happiness. And he said, "You have a purpose. You were born for a reason. Your life purpose defines you. It helps you know who you truly are. For most of us, there is a gap between the life we are leading and who we truly are." So I definitely hadn't minded the gap. Thank you. And fallen right into it. And whilst I felt like this was a very scary time, and I eventually got diagnosed with ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, which, if anyone has had it or knows anyone with it, is just an incredibly debilitating illness, I thought, well, this is probably an opportunity for me to understand that mind-body connection, and maybe to get my life back on track, and maybe to figure out my calling. And so I took it as an opportunity and went on many courses and did many things. And as I tell you a bit more about the story of my recovery, I thought, just in case the universe hasn't delivered you with a message from Royal Mail telling you what your purpose is, you might like to consider these 3 questions to finding your calling. So the first question is, what really matters to you? And obviously, when I got sick, what really mattered to me was getting better. And also, as time went on, I realised what really mattered to me was helping other people to get better, but also to help them to get in touch with their own purpose in life. And the second question is, what are you willing to fight? What are your gifts? There's a lovely book by Dave Issay called The Power and the Purpose of Work. And he says that there's this sweet spot in the Venn diagram of your gifts, feeling appreciated and doing good in the world and giving to people. And I think it's important to say around gifts, like I used to have this idea that we'd be like Mozart or someone, I don't know if this is true of Mozart, but he was just born playing the piano. But in these years that I've been working with people, what I've realised is that sometimes you don't know what your gifts are, or you need time to develop them, or you may have many gifts, or you may focus on some of your gifts at some point and not at another, and move on to something else at another point, or be multi-passionate. And the third question, and I think this one ties in really well with courage, is what are you willing to fight for? So I worked with my gifts and went and did my training that Sally mentioned. And obviously what I wanted to fight for was to get better and help other people to, as I said, find their calling. I love that Tara Moore says in her book Playing Big about that you'll know when you find your purpose because you'll feel under-resourced, probably lacking in confidence, you probably won't have enough money, and many other things besides. And that shows you that you're going in the right direction. And I think that your calling really requires you, therefore, to have a lot of courage and resilience and to keep going. And I would say that courage isn't the absence of fear, thank God, because I have lots of it. I'm naturally a kind of overthinker, an over-analytical person, a good worrier, and but I do have a willingness to step up and face my fear. This happened for me at 21. I decided that I should do a parachute to try and overcome my fears. And it was a static line parachute jump as well, which meant I would be jumping alone and the line would make my parachute open. And so I'm shit scared. I still did it, but I found out later that somebody had to push me out of the plane. So sometimes you need a little bit of a hand with your courage. So courage also, I think, is a personal thing, as Sally was saying, and sometimes involves balance and connection with yourself. And sometimes it means saying yes to something, sometimes it means saying no to something and putting up a boundary, sometimes it means keeping going, sometimes it means asking for help, and sometimes it means taking 100 tiny steps, and sometimes it's a giant leap. But as long as it's in the direction of what you feel is right and what is growthful for you. And I know that there's always a payoff with courage as well. Whether it's getting that amazing book deal, or it's just feeling like you've done the right thing, or knowing you can do something again because you've had the courage. It always pays off in some way. I had a big payoff with my courage. Because having never spoken on stage or done drama at school, when I got better from my illness, which by the way took 6 years, but I got there in the end, and I've been better ever since now for 8 or 9 years, I think, I decided that I should try improvised comedy. And I was absolutely terrified. But the amazing payoff was that at this class I met my husband, and I got a love of performance and started to feel like I could be brave enough to do things like this. That payoff, I think, is always worth it. So now I'd like to invite you just to do a little exercise with me. If you feel comfortable, to close your eyes just for a second and think about your own calling in life, your own purpose, or whatever it is that you want to embrace at the moment. And then imagine that there's a big bubble of confidence in front of you. Now, you might see that as a giant glowing golden bubble of light, or I did this exercise earlier with my husband and he saw it as a submarine. So, whatever works for you. And just imagine stepping into that massive bubble of courage and breathing that in right down to the tips of your toes, the tips of your fingers, the top of your head, filling up your whole body with masses of courage and confidence. And just thinking about what it is that you would love to go and do or be or say to someone. How is it that you'd love to go and be brave now that you're filled with all this amazing courage? Just breathe that in for a second longer. And maybe make a commitment to yourself to go and do that thing. And let me know. When you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back to the room. Thank you very much.